My name is Glenn Titus Campbell, CVM. See it happen.
Good evening, I'm Jody Ann Quarry and this is Lead Story. Tonight, we're turning our focus to everything after Hurricane Melissa. Access to justice after Hurricane Melissa yesterday and today we focus on maroon communities in Jamaica. After Hurricane Melissa, we're hearing their stories, their governance structures, and how they're navigating recovery after the hurricane. The storm's impact was felt across several maroon territories with landslides, road damage, and interrupted water supplies. But what has attracted national attention is the range of responses to government assistance. Akong Pong has indicated it does not wish to receive government support at this time, citing its rights under the 18th century treaties. But other maroon communities in Moortown and Charlestown have taken a different approach, one that welcomes partnership with the state in areas such as cultural preservation, community welfare, and infrastructural recovery. So, tonight, we explore the differences and ask, how do maroon communities balance tradition and sovereignty with practical recovery needs? What does collaboration look like in the moment of national challenge? And how should we understand these histories in a modern Jamaican state? We begin tonight in Charlestown. one such Maroon community, and we'll speak tonight with their captain, Delano Douglas. This is Lead Story. We're speaking tonight with the captain of the Charlestown Maroons, Captain Delano Douglas. Thanks for joining us this evening, Captain Douglas.
Aquaba. And I must also say, Yanking Pong, bless our smart pray, Shang Pong Nanikom Sikin Bebwa, meaning God bless us all, and may the Queen of Heaven pour on our richest blessing on our daily proceedings.
Captain Delano, this is something that for many Jamaicans, the Maroons have been part of Jamaican culture, but they would never have heard what it is that you have said a moment ago, therefore not being integrated into Maroon life. What does it mean for you to have a piece of Jamaican history and heritage that you're preserving, but also that Jamaicans might not be aware of or be part of the kind of histories that you are working on preserving there in Moortown?
Well, over here in Charlestown, we are blessed to be a Maroon community. This is actually the legacy and, of our ancestors that they have fought for, that they have shed their bloods for. So we know, as children of the Maroon, descendants of the Maroon, as we call ourselves, Yankunku Pikibo, mean children of the Maroon. So we are here now to sustain and maintain this rich, diverse culture and, to actually bring it to the forefront so other persons, not only persons who live in Charleston, but, globally, persons can learn about the culture and know more about us and know how, we could best work and evolve in this time, in these difficult times ahead of us.
Captain Delano Douglas, this is a difficult time for the nation after the passage of Hurricane Melissa. What is it like there in Charlestown after the passage of the hurricane? Help people figure out where you are and then the kinds of impacts that you had.
Well, overall, in Charlestown, the hurricane has left its impact, just as like everywhere else across Jamaica. But we didn't get the worst of it. We do have an operating museum and a Safyard in which we do conduct tours and stuff like that. So, infrastructural wise, we had a few damages, maybe about like maximum 3 to 4 persons got their house blown down. Actually, the river was overflowing its bank, where it affect the community, where it washed away chunks of lands, even a boat structure, even though anyone wasn't living inside of it at the moment, but there were, other items inside there that was very useful that got washed away by the river. So right now, the community is in need of river training, even though we are getting assistance from NAA, and that's coming from the minister's office and from the government themselves as well. Yes, we are now in the process of doing some form of river training to actually get the water from underneath that house, because it actually undermined a concrete structure also, in which if the river rain do fall and the river come back down, then that concrete structure will be gone also. So they are now urgently working to turn the water and to resolve those situations. And we are now trying to assist other persons, like these 3 to 4 persons that we know are now like homeless. We are trying to see how best we could find support and help to assist these type of stuff within the community as well.
Charlestown is one of the places that has, as any community in Jamaica, the benefit of the government of Jamaica being able to help and support. What kind of help and assistance have you been able to receive at this time?
Well, as I said, it's mainly for the river training right now, and we are still in dialogue with the government of the day about further assessment. They have done a wonderful job where we are restored the light, water, and internet. The main services are back to the community. May not be in the best of operating, but we still have it, and it's a plus. So that's with every day going by, the work improves. So that is the most we have gotten from now, but we are still in dialogue, as I said, with the government's office to see what other assistance are there and what else they could do. And also, yes, we are here on the ground trying to do stuff for ourselves as well, and trying to play our part in this difficult time too, as a community and as a Maroon indigenous village as well.
You call yourself a Maroon indigenous village. What does that mean for Jamaicans who might not be caught up on how Maroons see themselves and why that's important after Hurricane Melissa?
Well, it is about a matter of being educated who the Maroons are, because when you check out the curriculum that we have learned in school, from my knowledge, there is not a lot of Maroon history that is taught as the freedom fighters for this beautiful land of Jamaica. So I think it's more about educating the youth from an early age about the Maroons and the other indigenous communities and tribes that are there, just like the Taino, the Yamen Council. They are here too as well, and live and operational in this beautiful country of Jamaica. So it's not only the Maroons, but we do have the Taino. So it's just a matter of educating the broader community, and as I always say, this is why we have museums and stuff like that we do try to educate persons about our existence and who we really are.
You're looking as well for many people about this balance between culture and impact and heritage. What can we learn from the Maroons, and what do you think the government of Jamaica in our curriculum should be teaching about the Maroons?
Well, they should be teaching, the general history of the Maroons, because the Maroon, history is really broad, from the herbs to the different, the different wars that was fought. Just like the second Maroon War with the Trelawney Town Maroons that was tricked in a peace treaty and was shipped to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then to Sierra Leone. So there's a lot of stuff, because we have this rich culture with music, herbs, and when I speak about herbs, and I must emphasize about these herbs, because these herbs are our healing. Let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. So we have all these rich herbs here in Jamaica, and they have a lot of medicinal properties that we as an island should be exploring. We have them in our household, and we just literally cut them down every day.
And I think that is then the benefit of having Maroons here, helping us with those long-standing cultural traditions of things that we have in our homes that can be beneficial to us, helping us as well appreciate what's going on there in Charlestown after the passage of Hurricane Melissa. Was Captain Delano Douglas of the Charlestown Maroons. We're glad that you're able to join us today inside Lead Story. We have to take a break inside the show. We'll come back, though, hearing from other Maroon communities, including the leader of the Moortown Maroons, Chief Wallace Sterling, next.
Here's another tip from Hawkeye to help you secure the season. One of the most important steps in keeping your home or business safe during the holidays is to secure all entry points. Doors and windows should be reinforced with quality locks, and sensor alarms can provide an extra layer of protection. Positioning cameras to cover blind spots ensures that every corner is monitored, giving you peace of mind even when you are away. With Hawkeye as your trusted supplier and installer, you know the systems are reliable and professionally set up. By combining good locks, an alarm system, and surveillance, you create multiple layers of protection, making it much harder for anyone to gain unauthorized access. Simple steps like these can make a big difference in keeping your property, family, and holiday celebrations safe and secure. This has been your Secure the Season tip from Hawkeye.
Rivalry is back and the stakes are sky high. This December, Jamaica's Sunshine Girls storm into London to face England's Vitality Roses in a two-match Horizon Netball Series showdown. And we're bringing every second to you live on CBM. On Saturday, December 13 and Sunday, December 14, cheer on the Sunshine Girls as they defend their dominance. Match time, 9 a.m. 2 teams, 2 battles, 1 island. Battered but not broken. Feel the speed, the energy, the fire. Sunshine Girls versus Vitality Roses, live from the Copper Box Arena. See it happen only on CVM TV and CVMTV.com.
Thanks so much for staying with us inside Lead Story. Today we're looking at the Maroons after Hurricane Melissa, and we have to put in context for you why we're having this conversation, because some Maroon communities have welcomed partnership with the government of Jamaica, while others have not. We just completed a conversation there with the Charlestown Maroons there in Portland. And now we're joined on Zoom by Chief of the Moortown Maroons, Colonel Wallace Sterling. Colonel Sterling, thanks so much for joining us inside Lead Story.
Okay, first of all, let me say a big welcome and thank you, Medasi, for having us this afternoon. It is my pleasure to really speak to you. This afternoon or this evening, we concentrate on what's taking place within the Windward Maroon community, especially the Rio Grande Valley Maroon communities, which it is Moortown and all the other surrounding communities in that, one neck of the wood.
So then talk to me about what happened after Hurricane Melissa, because we're checking in on you now. How have you been? What is it like after the passage of the hurricane?
Okay, let me say that we have made an estimate of the damage that was done to houses, person's cultivation. Basically, we didn't do anything about road or river damage or anything like that, right? Because some communities suffer greater damage than others. For example, you're talking about an average of 8 or 9 communities in this area. And some of them, the level of destruction was greater than the others. But what we have done as a people, we have picked ourselves up and we have tried our best to replace what we can replace, put back roofs on, houses that were blown down. We have built, like here in Moortown, we have just almost complete a house that was blown. It's basically a one-room place, but we basically replace it with brand new materials. We have, from the day after the hurricane, we really had start clearing the roadways because we knew the storm was coming, so we had power saws and stuff like that we used to cut the roadway out. And well, the JPS has managed to restore the current in most places in basically quick order. So we were able to have like the Wi-Fi up and running. Digital tower was not disturbed in a sense, but the electricity to the tower was down, so they managed to get that back up and running. So the communication part of it is good. The attraction that we have in the areas, most of them, all of them basically were affected, but with the level of things that we want to get done and the location of some of them, we were able to get them back up to a level, I wouldn't say 100%, but to a satisfactory level where visitors can still come by, because we do depend on ecotourism as a part of the economic growth of our community. Farmers, on the other hand, had suffered a lot because everybody who really did some form of farming, they lost things like, because if you cultivate, banana, plantains and stuff like that, and hurricane don't really mix well. So we have lost a lot of that. They got a lot of coconut trees that were blown down, breadfruit trees, ackee tree, and other orchard crops trees that were blown down as well. So it's just about just buckling down and replanting what you have to replant in order to prepare yourself for the next hurricane. Because for sure we're going to have more.
You're sure we're going to have more? Climate scientists believe that if we don't have more, there'll certainly be more intense hurricanes going forward. But this is something then that is going to impact not only the Jamaicans who don't identify as Maroons, but those who do. Inside the Moortown community, help us understand then some of the most urgent needs that you had in the first 48 hours after impact, and why you've been able to now say that you have seen some things come back up, like utilities and services. Who came in and did the assistance work for you?
So the utility work was basically the responsibility of the JPS. So, I mean, apart from the like, as I said, Digicel has a tower in Moortown. So they did what they had to do. The government now, through the National Work Agency, they spent time clearing the blockage that were on the road, doing out some drains and, land slippage that came down. They really worked tirelessly to get the roads up and running, 2-lane traffic, because some place like, if you're coming into Moortown, you're leaving from Fellowship, coming to a place called Riverview, there was a big blockage there, and the NAA managed to clear all of those places. Going on to Kent, going up Ginger outside, they clear all the blockage into Cornwall Barracks and so on and so forth. So from that side, the government agencies that were at their responsibility, they came out and they did what they had to do to make, life much more comfortable for the people of the community. So as I said, the first 48 hours, we as citizens of the community, it is our custom and practice. If the road get blocked, we have power cells, so we're gonna go out there and cut the trees from out there. We might not do a complete job until the NAA come by, but we just go out and clear it so that we can have a more easy access to and for the community. And that's basically what you do.
Have you had an offer by the Jamaica Defence Engineering Corps, the JDF Engineering Corps, in helping rebuild or in clear blockages, or helping you with houses that might have experienced damage?
No, we never had that offer from them, but we did get assistance from overseas as well. Jamaicans living overseas, and to, like, for example, university, college in university that we really interface with from time to time, and the diaspora community, they went together and they put something with Catterwood, to Hardcourt Fuller and Dr. Osborne and Dr. Sharon Corning and the others, and Dr. Dexter Garden from Evergreen University, and they assist us in funding to help to rebuild a house in Moortown and in Comfort in Millbank as well, and whatever assistance they can give. Otherwise, they give, and we have persons. They're basically from the community, but living in the diaspora, they're sending down assistance, and there are other local agencies that basically overseas and in Jamaica that provide care packages for some members of the community. Not everybody, but and the member of parliament for East Portland had donated a generator to the community to assist, and he had also promised to assist persons who have lost, like, chicken, and can give them chicken so that they can start back at some way. So you get a chicken and you get the feeding to last for the 6 weeks, which is normally the lifetime of chickens. So all of these things are being done, and the main thing is that the member of parliament has also promised to supply us with water, reaping, rainfall, things, so we can always have water in the community.
I think that's so important to be able to appreciate how MPs have been able to help, the kind of help and support that you have been able to receive to not only support yourself, but also the Maroon community there in Moortown, and, as you said, the surrounding communities. But help us understand now, because for many Jamaicans, they don't understand what Maroons are, how they operate, and what it is that you have as a separate place in Moortown that is now interfacing with government services. Help us understand how the Maroons interface and interact with Jamaica.
Right, okay, fine. So a Maroon community, in every Maroon community, you have the leader, which is generally the colonel, the chief, or whatever terms you choose, maybe the captain or a major or whatever. And then there's a council that generally goes with that, right? And the council is like the highest decision-making body in the community. They're the ones who will interface with government and outside agency. But at the same time, the council has a responsibility to meet with the communities in what we call township meetings, right? And we have those meetings, and whatever decision the council has taken, if it's not an emergency thing, then you got to put it to the township, and the township will decide, whether or not it should or should not be. So that's how we operate. So as a Maroon community, I must say that one of the things that happened is that most persons are related to some way, somehow or the other, and everybody knows everybody. So if it is that I want to know how many persons reside in Moortown, I can get 2 or 3 persons and I can sit in my house or somewhere in the square, and I start at one house at one point, and I can count everybody who lives in that house, and I can give you their approximate age as well. And so people will come out and help each other as is the custom, to replace, roofs, and because many roof persons will have their roof to get assistance, and you get some material. We have still not fully replaced every roof that has been lost, because some of them is much. But we are in dialogue with the government, especially the Ministry of Culture, which the Maroon communities interface more than any other ministry. And I know the minister we are sending everything to them, and I'm sure that minister, knowing her, will do her best to ensure that we get the required assistance that we need at this point in time.
And I think that's important that you've put it in that context. For Jamaicans, though, when they think of Maroons, they think of you as one single body where all the Maroons all across Jamaica speak in one voice. Is that accurate?
Well, let me put it this way. The Maroon across Jamaica has a secretariat, and the secretariat will speak on things of, international and in some cases national importance, as we speak as one body. But individual Maroon community has the right to speak for themselves in however way they feel like speaking, and the secretariat will not necessarily intervene or say anything about it, because the duty of the secretariat is not necessarily to tell the individual communities how they should run their affairs. But for example, if there's a national matter that we need to deal with the government, we will come together as a secretariat, as a body known as WICA, and it also includes other indigenous people, the Tainos as well. So we sit down and we have our discussions as to the way forward, how we deal with these things. But you got to still bear in mind that there are things that are unique to each Maroon settlement. Because, for example, Captain Douglas spoke to the damage that the river has done to their community. We have river erosion from time to time, but not as severe as what he speaks now.
And so different Maroon communities are experiencing different things, and therefore having different sorts of discussions. It was important for us then to hear from different Maroon communities today. We just spoke there with Colonel Wallace Sterling from the Moortown Maroons. Thank you so much for spending time with us inside Lead Story.
Medasi, thank you.
So it's important for us to continue to hear from what's going on with Maroon communities. But one Maroon community isn't interested in immediately taking government support. And well, that has now sent us all to a crossroads. We'll bring in our expert panel next inside Lead Story.
Where it all begins. The quest to become great. Inspired by those who went before them, these 4 boys dream of playing in the ISSA schoolboy football competitions.
Will you score this for Casey? Will you score? It's a shot! It's a goal!
and it's a shot, and it's a goal. And KC has won the Manning Cup, and they will play Clarendon College in the Olivia Shield.
Start your journey with a Jane Bank Small Business Loan, with small business loans with as little as $10,000 and up to $4 million.
The time is 8:30.
Every dream conquered is another dream gained. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction, 'cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people them I say we are my show tonight. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't fit it dark, shine your lights Thanks so much for staying with us inside Lead Story. I'm Jody Ann Quarry, and we are having the big discussion. What about maroon communities after the passage of Hurricane Melissa? We're going to be talking about what that means, having a maroon community, and a very thorny issue that has now arisen once again, if they're separate from the rest of Jamaica. We're joined tonight by attorney at law and researcher on issues relating to maroon governance, Dr. Marcus Goff, and former Alcan Professor of Sustainable Development at the University of the West Indies, Mona Campus, Professor Anthony Clayton. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to Lead Story.
Good evening, Jody Ann. Thank you for inviting us.
An absolute pleasure an absolute pleasure having you both inside the show. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor Clayton. Let's put in context this conversation that we're having today. A statement by one maroon chief that we invited here inside Lead Story tonight, Akongpong Chief Richard Curry, who, after the passage of Hurricane Melissa, rejected the militarization, he called it, of the kind of support that was being provided by the government of Jamaica. Let's take a listen as we hear what Chief Curry had to say, because this places us in a situation that we were in 2022. We're back in 2025. What is now the place of the Maroons when compared with the state of Jamaica? And this is something that we have had conversations about before, but the passage of Hurricane Melissa has made it very, very clear that we now need to make more space for this, because this is something that Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness has said is a time where we should all come together. Let me pull in Professor Clayton here for a minute as we talk about this. Professor Clayton, we're watching a situation where a piece of Jamaica is now under discussions for belonging to someone else, with one group of Maroons, the Akongpong Maroons, making it very clear that they don't want to have government resources inside that area. Let's take a listen to to Richard Curry, Chief of the Akongpong Maroons, as he talks about why he has rejected government assistance at this time.
Honorable Prime Minister, following a deep, comprehensive internal review and a formal deliberation, the full Maroon Council has this time decided not to accept the offer on the militarization of the space during the recovery effort. The full Maroon Council instead has resolved to continue with the response, utilizing civilian resources from our joining communities and our partners, both locally and internationally, who have offered to the community their assistance in the recovery efforts. Instead, the Council would like to thank you for the offer on materials and would accept the offer on those materials and equipment necessary to assist in those recovery efforts. The established reconstruction partnerships and resources Akompong has secured through international donations, through technical sponsorships, and volunteer engineering assistance sufficient to address the rebuilding and development needs arising from the hurricane.
And this is now word from Chief of the Akompong Maroons, Colonel Richard Curry, talking to us through his Instagram platform, his social media platforms, where he shared the decision that had been made by the full council there in Akompong, something that we learned about how the full council worked just a moment ago with the Chief of the Moortown Maroons, Colonel Wallace Sterling. Professor Clayton, having now heard this statement being made by a Jamaican leader of an area indicating that he would prefer the Jamaica Defence Force not to come into the area, even after a week where the Jamaica Defence Force's engineering corps volunteered to go in there. Is that something that you understand to be something that the good chief can say?
This is not the only country which has a successionist movement, but most successionist movements have not worked out very well. The only ones which have has been when there has been some basis for a genuine accord between both parties as to the separation of land, and with that, the separation of rights, responsibilities, and powers. When anybody tries to do this unilaterally, it doesn't usually end very well. Now, at the moment, there are about 15, 20 countries in the world which have got some special arrangement with indigenous peoples. And every single one of those countries is a democracy. The reason for that is that authoritarian states do not allow successionist movements, and they respond to them with murder and oppression. But there are a handful, or a double handful, of democracies which have allowed some separation of lands, rights, duties, responsibilities, and powers. And the kind that there's, and each one of these is different because the history, the tradition, and the legal framework is different in every case. But very roughly, they fall into two groups. There's the ones where usually the indigenous people are claiming that some historical treaty has been violated, or some historical treaty still confers obligations on the government today. And you can find some of those in Canada, for example. But my understanding is, and Marcus can tell me if I'm wrong, that this is not similar to the situation here. The ones that we're looking at here is where an indigenous group is trying to negotiate a more comprehensive settlement with the government. And these are generally referred to as treaties or modern treaties. And the thing is, you can't unbundle them and say, well, we'd like to have this government service, but not that government service. There usually has to be an agreement, a whole raft of agreements in the treaty, which cover things like typically indigenous rights, land ownership, the legal power to regulate access to land and land use, which would include things like mining and water rights and so on, unless they are specifically reserved by the host government. And may also include some separation of the legal systems, so that in the States, for example, you can find examples where the tribal reservation areas take on some of the responsibility for their own policing and law enforcement, So if you look at the tribal reservations, the nearest police force, for example, has no jurisdiction, which is why every time there's a major issue in the tribal reservation, it has to be a federal agency, such as the FBI, that intervenes. And they have had to do so on a number of occasions because when the tribal areas take themselves out with the remit of normal policing, in a few cases, they've been taken over by organized crime. And there was a case earlier this year when a respected tribal leader was murdered because he tried to dislodge a violent criminal organization that had taken over one of the tribal reservations. And this is a problem where people decide to detach themselves from the services of the security forces, the army and the police, because they're actually saying we will do these things by themselves. And what we have seen in a few instances is they absolutely have not had the capability to do it for themselves. And what they've ended up doing is inadvertently providing a safe haven for some larger criminal organization. Now, the two particularly
hold on, Professor Clayton, because you did say you wanted to ask Dr. Goff, Dr. Marcus Goff here, attorney at law and also an expert in these sorts of things, since he represents at least one of the Maroon communities here in Jamaica, whether or not you're right. So let's pull in then Dr. Marcus Goff. Dr. Goff, having heard Professor Clayton help us understand the context and the contours within which one group wants to secede or pull away and have their own state where there was a state before, that is, a piece of Jamaica would no longer belong to Jamaica, it would belong to someone else, then what is it that we're looking at in 2025 as we're having this discussion about who can go into spaces and help after the passage of a major hurricane? Dr. Goff?
Yes, thanks very much. So, yes, I mean, I think Prof. Clayton is sharing some useful experiences from overseas, which tells us that this issue is not a Jamaican issue alone. It's an issue really that has been caused, of course, by centuries of colonization by European nations. And those nations, the Europeans found on these lands, they didn't deem to be civilized enough to be called nations, to be called peoples, and to have the right to govern themselves. So these are colonial issues that countries like Jamaica continue to grapple with. What I wouldn't agree with is to refer to the Maroon cause as a secessionist state, because Maroons have been independent for centuries in Jamaica. The institution of the Maroon Colonel.
Hold on. Let me hear that again. Maroons have been what for centuries in Jamaica?
Yeah,
I think they have exercised a certain level of independence in Jamaica for centuries, and a certain level of self-governance in Jamaica for centuries, represented to their elected colonels and their councils, which have predated, the independence of Jamaica, predated all political parties in Jamaica. And so that historical continuity of self-governance can't be ignored. And so to say secessionists would suggest that there is a movement to go away from the state of Jamaica. But I dare say that Maroons have always been separate from the British monarchy.
Well, let me see if I can play here a clip from Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness when he responded to this same claim in 2022 about this division of Jamaica and whether or not there could be some sort of independence. Prime Minister Holness spoke about this on a platform during COVID-19 as he helped us understand his position and his government's position on this issue.
Jamaica is a unitary, sovereign state. There is no other sovereign authority in Jamaica other than the government of Jamaica. I want that to be absolutely clear. None. And under my leadership, not 1 inch of Jamaica will come under any other sovereign authority. What you are asking would be another for the government of Jamaica to take taxpayers' money and grant funds to fund another government. This is not a government saying they are a local government, a parish council government, which is under our constitution. Are you crazy? Really? Do you know what you're asking?
That's Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness responding in 2022, and this issue was once again placed on the agenda. Let me first find out what you think after the break, gentlemen, as we take a break here inside Lead Story.
Jamaica's borders is a key priority for the Jamaica Customs Agency. The JCA will remain vigilant and resolute in effectively fulfilling this mandate. The time brought to you by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
8:45.
Every dream conquered is another dream game. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction. 'Cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people that must say we are my show tonight.
Let's delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
We've been speaking tonight inside Lead Story Prime with Professor Anthony Clayton, former Alcan Professor of Sustainable Development at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, and Dr. Marcus Goff, attorney at law and expert on issues relating to Maroons and Maroon governance here in Jamaica. Dr. Goff, you just heard before the break Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness categorically state in 2022 not 1 inch of Jamaica would be ceded under his watch. That's what this Maroon claim sounds like to many people, that they want to take away or go away with a part of Jamaica. If we're going to be respecting that long historical claim you spoke of, are you aware that that's the reaction that people have, and what's your response to that reaction?
Well, I think that reaction understands the issues. I don't think that the issues are not about breaking away and forming a nation state and seeking to join the United Nations as an independent state in that regard. I think the nature of the relationship, the concept of a state in a state is something that really is all around us. Think of the USA, for example. Think of Canada. Think of countries which recognize, as Prof. Clayton mentioned, indigenous rights, so therefore they recognize the right of those communities to have a level of self-governance in their customs and traditions and institutions. This is something that is not strange to many countries, even within a post-colonial common law world. And so I think the issue is not quite understood in the context of breakaway from a new state, but having a relationship with the national state that involves both rights and responsibilities of mutual nature. That's what the treaty was. And so when I hear President talk about a modern treaty, so we're really talking about how to redefine the terms of engagement of cooperation between the Maroons and the government of Jamaicans. So in that respect, I do want to say that those utterances from the Prime Minister, and I think what I've seen last week from the Prime Minister, I think represents to me a stretch of outreach. I heard Korea as well, reciprocate, not to reject the offer from the Prime Minister, but I think to reject the aspect of it, to still accept the offer. So I want to see this, and I see this as something that is a move in the right direction, away from what you had a while ago as the Prime Minister's earlier statements, to something that we can work towards, as having a relationship, building a mutual understanding of mutual rights and responsibilities.
Well, Professor Clayton, a moment ago, Dr. Goff said this sort of treaty would have had details worked out about it. It would have had the sort of minutiae that we're looking at, the details about who takes care of what, who is in charge of what. This 18th century treaty that is often referred to by the Maroons that identifies a relationship between it and the Jamaican state. Is it going to detail so that Jamaicans can better understand just what exactly the British agreed to that we now have to take over?
No, you see, I don't have any faith that a treaty from 18, whatever it was, provides the necessary guidance to what has to be done now. You're only going to get a chance of a stable outcome if both parties if their positions are not too far apart. And as the excerpt from the Prime Minister you just played us made very clear, the government of Jamaica is not willing to engage with this issue at all. Now, if you think about some of the issues that would have to be resolved, I think you start to get a better idea of why they might not be willing to engage. Two particularly important issues that would arise in this case would be mining and water rights. Now, at the moment,
and that is particularly speaking about the Akongpong Maroons because of their location inside the cockpit country.
It's the cockpit country, yes. Now, at the moment, control over these resources resides with the government of Jamaica. So if that area was to become independent or semi-autonomous, these would have to be either specifically exempted or reserved to the central government or else transferred. And then the terms of the transfer would have to be embedded in the treaty that I was referring to earlier. Then you'd have issues as to whether existing property rights would be transferred or might be extinguished under a new government in the area, and if so, would people have redress, and then which court would have jurisdiction. And then you'd have issues as to who would be responsible for paying for the maintenance of the electricity grid, the upkeep of roads, provision of schools, development of new infrastructure, and even more difficult issues with regard to macroeconomic management and financial regulation. If, for example, you had a new autonomous enclave that wanted the power to vary the tax rate in order to either increase their revenues or attract businesses to relocate into a lower tax area. And if you look at examples elsewhere...
Hold on, Professor Clayton. I just want to let viewers know that on their screens right now, as you're speaking, they're seeing a video that's playing to the side while Chief of the Akongpong Maroons, Richard Curry, has made it very clear that he is not willing to accept the assistance of the JDF, speaking now for the ruling council there in Akongpong. These are residents within the area who said they want the JDF to come in. They want the help and assistance. How does that square then with what you're talking about? Not only the property rights that would be extinguished and the change of relationship, but also who would be responsible for these individuals within this area?
Well, this is exactly right, Jody, and this is why it is so difficult. If you don't have a clear majority on both sides for the change, then it's going to be contested. And that is going to be an incredibly difficult argument for the side that wants devolution or succession to win. And, one area that's always going to be of an enormous concern is if you have a new form of government emerging, and they are now responsible for providing services to the people in their area, they need revenue, which means that they will then want to have the power to raise taxes locally.
Let's talk about what that might look like. Prime Minister Andrew Holness visited the Akongpong Maroons after St. Elizabeth was one of the hardest hit areas after the passage of Hurricane Melissa. Let's take a listen to what he had to say and then bring in Dr. Marcus Goff, because the Prime Minister is willing to allow for the Akongpong Maroons to have some autonomy as a local government. Let's take a listen to what he had to say on that occasion.
My presence here today is to demonstrate, reaffirm, and to establish that there is no community for which the government of Jamaica is not responsible. There is no community in which the government of Jamaica must not be present. And there is no community that is neglected or taken for granted. The government of Jamaica, which I represent, is responsible for every community, for every Jamaican. The government of Jamaica respects the local efforts, the local government, and the local organizations of communities. That is the strength of Jamaica. That is what makes us strong. We will never be the same, everyone. We will have different perspectives. We will have different views. However, we are one Jamaica. We are one people. And nothing must divide us, especially in the face of a disaster. We must unite.
Dr. Marcus Goff, having heard now Prime Minister Holness give autonomy there to the Maroons, talking about the local efforts that had been put in place to help the Akongpong Maroons recover, is that enough?
But the Prime Minister can't give autonomy. Can't give autonomy. I said, we're exercising autonomy for centuries. But what I would say is that, let's say, we're moving in the right direction, but ultimately the issue of indigenous rights cannot be ignored. For us to continue to ignore the presence of indigenous peoples or communities which have indigenous rights is to continue to perpetuate the lies of the colonizer. And so it's difficult for us to say we're arguing for reparations, right? And at the same time, we're perpetuating the lies that have held that governance.
That looks like a complex conversation that we're clearly going to have a part 2 on inside Lead Story Prime. Professor Anthony Clayton and Dr. Marcus Goff, thank you so much for joining us and being part of our expert panel as tonight we looked at the Maroons' life after Melissa.
It's time.
Welcome to High School Pitchside. We have another fascinating episode for you.
More matches, more big clashes.
Let's talk about some of the big rivalries coming up this week.
More of your favorite features.
And trust me, you won't fall asleep in this history class.
And of course, we always want to hear from you.
Hear from your alma mater's players and coaches in Team Talk.
You know we can't leave you out. So send us your messages on social media and watch us react on FanView.
And you know we love a good little debate, right, Gio? We've got you covered all season long.
To the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yeah.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central. where it all begins.